Welcome, Mr. Alex Boyd.
What's up, Josh?
How's it going? And I guess
Good.
for
No
our,
complaints.
so yeah, I'm trying to bring on people who I've worked with who I feel like excelled in like these positions. So like showrunner's assistant, writer's PA, writer's assistant, whatever. And as I've told you many times, we're awesome at being a
Thank
showrunner's
you.
assistant. That's not just coming from me. The smartest guy in our room, who I think we both know who that was,
Hmm.
he said that you were the best he's ever seen at doing that job.
Well, it means a lot come from either of you, so
Yeah,
appreciate that.
I think more coming from him. Yeah,
Well, honestly, I get the most pride out of other former assistants, saying
right.
that I did a good job because you've been in the trenches, you know what it's like. So truly,
Yes,
both of you guys, that means a lot.
yes. So I think probably the best way to start is maybe just like sort of tell people what your journey was that took
Yeah.
you to eventually being a showrunner's assistant.
Yeah, sure. So I drove out to LA from the East Coast where I'm from right out of college. Um, I was told pre-Zoom times, especially, that you needed to be physically in LA before you're going to get a job here. And it basically proved true for me, where I was applying to a ton of jobs in LA from New York, where I'm from. Every response I got was, you need to be here because they wanted people to start imminently. And a lot of the advice I got was you needed a year of management or agency experience before you're going to be able to get in any writer's room if you don't have any connections, which I didn't. So I bit the bullet. I drove out here and landed up in an agency mailroom for a medium-sized agency. Was in that mailroom for about 4 weeks before I landed on a desk. And then that
Is
was
that so I don't want to cut you off.
uh,
Is that like I have no idea about the
yeah.
agency side. Is that standard to only be for 4 weeks in the mailroom and
I
then
was
land on a
I
desk?
was no, I was really, really lucky.
Yeah.
Most of the P I I was still pretty much the new guy when that happened.
Mhm.
And a lot of my friends who were, got in they got to be closer with a lot of the agents because they were in the mailroom longer. Basically, when you're in the mailroom, you're substituting for agents who are out sick.
Right.
You do a lot of that and then you do the actual mailroom work. But the goal is that you're substituting for a lot of assistants who are out sick. You work with a lot of different agents, you establish relationships with them, and you learn how to be a really good assistant because you can shadow assistants, you get a little bit of a taste of everything, and you get some training. So, luckily, I was a little bit of a quick study, and then it was a lot of luck that an assistant was out sick. I substituted for her, really hit it off with that agent who was in the TV literary department that represents writers and directors, which was exactly the world I wanted to be in to try to make my way into a writer's room one day. So we hit it off when I substituted for her. And then she left the company soon after. And so there was an opening. And in the agent's mind, instead of interviewing a bunch of outside people and going through everyone in the mailroom, he said, well, I already know Alex. He's done the work for me already. So I'll just hire him. That makes too much sense. And I was thrilled to do it. He was a great guy.
That's awesome.
So it was very lucky. And then again, typically you started an agency or a management company as an assistant out of the mailroom. Typically you promise at least a year. The arrangement sort of you promise a year, and if you do a good job after that year, they'll help you get your next gig with their resources. 6 months into working for that guy, one of his clients called up and said, hey, great news. I just got promoted to showrunner. And the agent I work for, being the mensch that he was, said, that's great. You should really consider hiring Alex as your showrunner's assistant. And the guy said, I don't know, maybe PA, we'll see. I don't really know him that well. And luckily,
Yeah.
I said something right in the interview because I got the showrunner's assistant job
On the show we worked on.
on the show we worked on. And I was there for 3 years.
Amazing. A couple things there. Like I feel like you're telling it like from the perspective of like I got so lucky, but it's
Well, I mean, I think you need luck and you need hard work for all of it, right? So,
right.
um, there were people in the mailroom who were above being in the mailroom. And the thing was, we were all overqualified in there,
Right.
uh, and there were more than one people. There was more than one person who interviewed for the job that I eventually got. The assistant who I took over for left early because it really wasn't working out, and that was really because of um, that person's work ethic and again feeling like you're above it. And I think most of these assistant positions you're going to be overqualified for it. You're capable of so much more, but it's not about that. It's just sucking it up, paying your dues, making the most of the experience. I think I was really good at those things. Like I went above and beyond for my boss, and that's why we hit it off so much, and that's why he put me up for the job when that client called after 6 months. So I was lucky that that client called at all, but I've seen people in similar situations who, when a possible lucky break happened, they either weren't prepared or they hadn't put themselves in a position to succeed. So it's a combination.
Right. And that's, yeah, that's sort of why I brought that up was yes, you got lucky, but you also had to have been awesome. And
Well, thanks.
that's why your boss was like, hey, you should really consider hiring this kid.
I try
And
to
then,
control the controllables, right? So having samples ready to be read if you ever get a chance, just doing a good job on a daily basis, knowing your stuff, having a positive attitude. You can't control anything else, so try not to sweat it, but you definitely can control those things. So funny story, when I was working on the show that we worked on, there were other shows in the same building, and you're an assistant, you're dying to maybe get a freelance script at some point, especially if you worked there multiple years. And my counterpart on another show, who I was friendly with, um, their showrunner walked out into the bullpen one day and basically said, "Hey, got a freelance script to give out. Who's got a pilot I could read? One of you is going to get it." And that showrunner's assistant just had nothing to share.
oh
And I wanted
man,
to kill that person because I was really good friends with them and I would have loved for them to
yeah,
get that break. And I felt
right,
like, you couldn't predict that was going to happen, but you have all the
right.
power in the world to have something ready when it does. You can't control if they're going to like it or not, but you have to be able to have something to show them. So that's what I try to do is just control the controllables. And other than that,
No,
just
that's very good
let the universe
advice.
take over.
Right. And I think that that's a good segue to, you had been on our show for a few seasons
Uh
and you
huh.
were very ready to become a writer's assistant, but that
Uh
wasn't
huh.
available on our show. And then I happened to a writer who I'd worked with for a long time was
Yep.
looking for a writer's assistant.
You hooked me up.
And because you had been awesome, I was like, hey, got like, I don't know if you're still looking for resumes, got this kid who's awesome. You want to like, are you still looking for resumes? And he was like, yeah, have them apply. And then not only did you apply, but they wanted writing sample. They wanted a writing sample.
They did. Yeah.
And then based on the strength of your writing sample, you got the job.
Yeah, I mean, we never had a conversation about, oh, I loved your script or anything like that. But again, I think just the fact that I had a sample ready to show that showed that I was serious about wanting to be a writer, and this wasn't
Right.
just a 9 to 5 for me. And one thing I found out that they definitely were looking for in that sample as a potential writer's assistant was they proofed the hell out of it. So if there were any typos whatsoever, I don't think I was getting that job.
Right.
So the fact that at least I had pride in my work, whether or not they connected to it creatively, I'd like to think they did, and it was a factor. But the fact that it was structurally sound and was looked professional and was thoroughly proofed was absolutely a big part of why I got that job.
Right. And you had the scripts, whether they liked it or not, you had a script ready
Exactly.
to submit where this showrunner assistant who you were talking about, unfortunately, like opportunity presented itself
Yeah,
and they had not put themselves in the best position to seize that opportunity, unfortunately.
exactly right.
Yeah. So exactly like you're saying, it's luck, but it's also opportunity.
Yeah, definitely.
So do you feel like coming from because and I told you this like not long after we started working together, like that you were just like unflappable.
Mm,
And that I feel like a little bit of that is innate. Like I was a food server for a long time and a bartender,
yeah.
and there were certain people that could be like super chill, and as soon as they get busy, they would just be freaking out. And I'd be like,
Yeah,
dude,
right.
like we're selling hamburgers, like we're not curing cancer
Right,
here.
right, right.
Like so someone gets their hamburger late and they give you a bad tip and you never see them again. What are you freaking out for?
Right.
And like you had this knack for just always like staying cool. Do you feel like I don't know, I get like where do you come down on that as far as it being like an innate gift versus like the agency world having prepared you for being on a showrunner's
That was part
desk?
of it. I think the big thing is, similar background to you. I worked at Burger King growing up. I was an elementary school janitor, summers in college. I worked all through college as a security guard, and just no one, I couldn't have been more separated from LA. Moving to LA was my first time west of the East Coast, period. I didn't know anyone in the industry. So I think I just came in with perspective that we weren't curing cancer. And, I'd been yelled at plenty before.
Right.
So I knew exactly what I wanted, and I made a conscious decision going in. You're gonna deal with some unpleasant stuff, but it's worth it to me, which
Right.
is a sad calculus to make, but I was realistic and I knew what I was getting into, and I said, yeah, I can take this. But like I said, when things are getting stressful, I knew we weren't curing cancer, and I knew that, intellectually, this is all doable. You
Hmm.
have 3 meetings you have to fit in. It's not like this is rocket science, that this is an impossible thing to fill out. You control everything that you can control. You anticipate as much as you can anticipate, and what you can't control, you can't control. Um, and it doesn't mean that you don't care. I think I cared very, very much for our show and for
Right.
making succeed. But if there was a fire going on, I knew it wasn't a real fire. I knew that I was lucky to be there, right? Because there were plenty
Right.
of people from my hometown who would kill to be working on a TV show, and they don't get that
Right.
opportunity. And it's a privilege to be underpaid. It's a privilege to be working long hours. I didn't have, and I don't have kids to worry about paying for, or,
Right.
luckily I'm super healthy. I don't have to worry about medical bills or anything like that. So I was able to afford to rough it,
Yeah.
when a lot of other people couldn't. So I just looked at it as, this is a trip. I'm lucky to be here. Um, Anything that's unpleasant is probably not about me. It's probably coming from something else, the other person or circumstances that they're going through.
Right.
And this is all kind of a fantasy land, right? Like none
Right.
of this. We're all so lucky to be doing any of this. So
Right.
I wasn't exactly going to freak out over anything.
Right. Yeah, I was a showrunner's assistant for 4 seasons,
Yeah.
and I had a similar, like, very fortunate, unusually quick trajectory like you, where the first show that I had worked on like 3 movies as like a post PA,
Hmm.
and then I got a job as a writer's PA through connections, and then like halfway into the first season of the show, the showrunner's assistant left to go be a scriptwriter on a show.
Hmm.
And then she suggested to the showrunner that he hire me. And I think he was kind of like, really, the PA? And
Yeah.
she was like, I promise you, like, this kid's got it. He can do it. And I wound up being his assistant for 4 years, and he was awesome. He was the greatest boss ever. I
That's
love him
great.
dearly. He was great.
Let me
Yeah,
ask.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember like doing the job. I was like, because I was nervous about like, do I know how to do the job? Because like, if when I
Yeah.
was the PA, if I ever had questions, there was something for me to ask.
Yeah.
Now I'm the person who, like, no, there's no one for me
Yeah.
to ask. And I remember I realized at one point I was like, all I really am doing all day is telling people who they need to talk to solve their problem.
It's a lot of it.
Like, right, like so much of it is just being like, oh, like we got to get the casting director involved, or like, oh,
Yeah.
like you got to talk to business affairs about
Yeah.
like I'm not actually solving any problems. I'm just
And that's
like,
that's the thing,
yeah,
right? Is you're not gonna
right,
be forced to do organic chemistry. Like
right,
everything is solvable. You might not know who the right person to go to is first, but there's a crew list, and you go down the line, you ask until you get the
right,
right person. So it's
right,
all possible.
right. So I guess in that vein, maybe do you mind just like sort of like telling people like what a showrunner's assistant does?
Yeah. So
I
I
mean, I
would
know that's a
say,
lot. It's a lot, but like, I
no,
guess
it's
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 yeah,
easy to come to, especially with, I knew what my expectations were going in, and having worked as different kind of assistants, and I know how the job was very different from that. And typically you hear assistant, you think, oh, I'm going to support this one person, as they go about their professional duties. A showrunner's assistant is very different, because you're really not just the showrunner's assistant, you're the assistant to the whole writing staff. And if our office was also connected to, uh, a studio where we were shooting the show and the crew, I'm sure I would have been supporting a lot of their needs too, right? So,
yeah,
your job is basically to make sure that the production is going smoothly, holistically. Obviously, you have to support the showrunner, number one. Nothing can get done if they're not getting done what they need to get done. So you're supporting them professionally, sometimes personally. Um, in terms of their responsibilities for the show. Sometimes they have other development work going on. So you're basically integrated with their team of managers, agents, and lawyers to make sure that their personal goals are being met. And then you're working with them, whoever the number twos are on the show, and the rest of the writers, to make sure all of the deadlines of the show are being met. And a difference from being a showrunner's assistant as opposed to, say, a writer's assistant or a script coordinator, is you don't just work for the showrunner during the duration of the room. You're with them from pre-production all the way through post, even when the writer's room is off. So it's nice because you get more steady employment. It means that you are serving that job longer, so it would take long to jump to other jobs. Like when I was a writer's assistant, we had a 6-month writer's room. Then there was 6 months of shooting that the showrunner's assistant was still employed for. I had an opportunity to then take that writer's assistant experience and look for the next thing, while the showrunner's assistant didn't have that opportunity yet.
Yeah.
But that person also got more stable employment, and you're kind of the eyes and ears of the showrunner, and you work with them most intimately. So it is, usually, fortunately, you're able to develop a really close relationship with them, and you get a bird's eye view into absolutely everything that's going on in terms of the production. You often get to sit in on all of the production meetings, which writers, assistants, script coordinators don't always get to do. So you really get an education on how a show is made, not just written.
Right. And that last thing you said, I think is interesting. Yeah, because I think being a showrunner assistant was the most educational. Because
Definitely.
yeah, you do get to have your hands in everything. Like I
Yeah.
thought, um, when your boss is getting notes from the studio and the network, you're on the
Hmm.
calls taking notes on those calls. And I always felt like that was super educational.
Yeah.
Eventually it gets to a point where it's like, but like,
Yeah.
but
But
in the
it's
beginning, it is super educational, I think.
it's taking the notes and then seeing your boss's reaction to the notes. Seeing your boss say, that's a really strong note, or that's a stupid note. We're actually going to ignore that after
Right.
they're off the call with the studio. And those are legitimate things.
Right.
And one a skill as a writer is having to navigate, you know, maintaining a strong relationship with studio execs who aren't writers themselves and are working on 7 shows at once and might not be as up to date as the viewers of the show are.
Right.
So they'll need things explained that maybe a viewer won't, and you have to, meet the execs halfway and give them a taste of what they want, but still maintain the integrity of the show and give the audience what they really want. So learning all those little things that wouldn't be maybe in a textbook were really helpful.
Right. And I think it really prepares you for it gives you like the proper perspective once you're like on the writing staff.
Yeah.
Cause like I'll see writers, like, and it is frustrating because you could be sitting in the room all day waiting
Yep.
to pitch the showrunner. And then
Right.
like you have the unenviable job of coming to the writing staff at 7 o'clock at night, being like, oh, unfortunately, not gonna be able to hear the pitch today.
That's right.
And having the writers be like, oh no. And
Right.
they would get so mad. And I'm like, dude, do none of you know what a showrunner's day is like? I promise you he would rather be hearing this pitch
Oh,
than whatever else he's doing because he probably had to go
every
put out a
single
fire.
time. I mean, the last 2 showrunners I've worked for, both of them just prayed to be in the room all day. That's all they wanted
Right,
to do.
right,
And they would have cut off their left arms to get out of a lot of the other things that kept them from the room.
right. I actually, ironically, was just talking to a first-time showrunner he's
Hmm.
been around for a long time, but this is
Uh-huh.
the first time he's run a show. And it's a new show. It hasn't even aired yet. But he was like, after the first like 2 episodes, he's like, I told the line producer, he was like, dude, this is a disaster. Like we're so effed. The show's falling apart. And the
Yeah.
line producer was like, everything's fine. Like, why are you freaking out? And the thing that the guy had never realized, and I think it's such good perspective, he was like, when you're the showrunner, all you're seeing all day long are the fires.
Right.
So he was like, from my perspective, the show is falling apart, but like in reality, it was fine. It was just which makes so much sense because like if I'm prepping my episode, and if me and the props department agree on what the prop should look like, then
Then
the
you don't
showrunner never has to know about
exactly.
it. They only hear
Right.
about it if there's a problem. So like it makes so much
Same
sense.
thing as the assistant, right? They only have so much bandwidth. You can't and shouldn't bother them with every little thing that's going on. So if it was something I could solve, I just solved it. They never knew about it. You don't
Right,
go in bragging, hey, I solved something for you. They hear about something when you say, I've tried everything. This can't work. It's actually becoming a real problem that's going to impact your life now.
right,
So it's a lot of controlled chaos, too, I found, coming from the agency world where everything was planned very far and ahead. There were much stricter schedules. This was much more last minute improvisational. You know how often prep memos would change
yes,
twice the night before, 3 times the night before. Um, and that was a transition, sort of having to surrender to the unpredictability and knowing that, kind of the win is that you and the showrunner get through the day. You get everything you needed just done through the day. All
right,
the meetings that have to happen happen. And maybe you didn't get to have that great creative breakthrough, but you actually were able to, keep the lights on for the next day. And then you just do that 365 times. And then
Right.
at the end, there's a season of TV.
Right. And then on our show,
Hmm.
did you also kind of have to be like the de facto office manager?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
same with,
that
yeah.
that changes show to show, I think, who in the support staff is the office manager. It could be the PA, it could be the showrunner's assistant.
Yeah.
I think seniority plays a role in that. It was different on the last show I was on.
Yeah.
Well, for me on our show, yeah, it was the showrunner's assistant.
Yeah, because like if if whatever if the AC if someone's office is too hot or cold
Yeah,
or you got to call the building manager and deal with that,
yeah,
and then if
yeah,
someone needs a drive on, you got to deal with that.
yeah. People want to come in on the weekends. They needed everything unlocked for them. We had construction done, so I was running that.
Right.
Um, that also goes to just running the tech on when we had prep meetings with our offsite crew. We were having, it's really funny to think about now. We should have just been Zooming the whole time. We had a really convoluted other telecom system that I would set up each time. So you really knew granularly every single thing that went into making the office run every single day.
Right. Any like processes or like programs or anything that you would use to like sort of keep yourself organized that you kind of swear by, or was it just,
Yes,
yeah,
definitely. It was a process that I took over from the agency world that I loved. Um, and it basically guarantees that nothing can fall through the cracks. So anything that ever comes into your inbox or that someone mentions to you that requires action on my end, say you come into me and you say, um, hey, the AC in my office isn't working. I call the first thing that I do is, whatever I need to do on it. Call the building, say you have to fix the AC. They say, great, we'll come fix the AC. But you can't just assume that that's going to be done, right? Other people can forget things. Um, other priorities can come up. It could be a really long process of fixing the AC in your office. So once the action on my end is done, I can't just forget about it. So what I did in the agency that I worked for was I had an accordion folder with 31 tabs labeled, numbered for each day of the month. And everything that came in on my end, I would print out or I would write something down and I would file it for a day of the month. So say you told me the AC in my office isn't working and I make the call and they say, great, we're going to fix it on Tuesday. Well, then I'm going to put that slip of paper that says Josh's AC in the folder for Tuesday. First thing I do when I come into the office on Tuesday, I take all the pieces of paper out that were filed for that day and I go through them. If you're really grooving, you're having a great day, it's a lot of just crumpling things up and throwing them away because they're already complete. The loop is closed. But if I see Josh's AC, then I can walk into Josh's office, make sure they actually fix the AC. If they didn't, I'm making that follow-up call before you even get into the office that day and have to suffer through no AC. When I started on our show, I wanted to do a digital version of that, not rely on the physical folder anymore. And I was just an obsessive email filer and schedule sender. So I would either have reminders or schedule emails to myself to come in, reminding me to check in on things that I was dealing with. So it would be literally impossible for me to forget them because I'd be digitally bombarded with it.
right.
And nothing could be filed away from my inbox until it was completely accomplished. So I was looking at my to-do list in my inbox and through my reminders. I was just staring in the face all day.
That's kind of a brilliant system.
I was trained with that. I can't pretend that I came up with it. It's so, yeah, I don't know. It's so old school and seems so unnecessary, but it's an absolute failsafe. You just absolutely nothing can be forgotten. And that's what I mean about controlling the controllables. You can
Right.
make sure that you never forget anything. That's something that you can control. You can't control what's going to come up. You can control that you will never forget something.
Yeah.
And
So
as you know,
that,
I was a big Google Drive person too.
yes.
So
Yes.
I liked having, we didn't really have a system before where we had a season Google Drive team shared drive where all of us could edit, add folders, add documents with a folder for each episode where you could just click in that folder and you could see all of the processes of the outlines and then all of the drafts all in one place. Because as you know, you could be in the fourth iteration of a draft and think, hey, what was that scene that fell out from the second outline that we hadn't used since? And having it right in that same location, I found really helpful. Hopefully, it was for you guys too.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. I
Glad to
like
hear
blown
it.
away like that I never in all my years like I don't know, I guess why would I but like this accordion system. Like how did
Yeah,
I never think to just
I
like
don't know how other people, weren't using it. So,
yeah,
like I said, you don't need the physical folder if you don't want it. If you want to, be eco-conscious and save paper, you can do the same exact thing
right,
um, with reminders or just, have a digital calendar that you log things for every day and you don't leave the office until all those things are crossed off or relogged for another day.
right.
I think it's better to have a dated to-do list than just a general to-do list. That's
Yeah, yeah,
overwhelming. I find it unhelpful.
yeah. Yeah, because I guess there'd be so much on it. Yeah, they're just like,
And so much that
yeah,
maybe it's not time to check in on that yet.
yeah,
If I
right,
call the office about your AC and I'm still staring at the rest of the day for the to-do list while they're working on it or they're getting to it,
right,
that's kind of a waste of my brain power too.
right. Huh. Um, so one thing that like I was told by the woman who left, who I took her job,
Hmm.
she was like and it was a little bit different situation that you were in on our show, but like on that show, my boss was actually the number two, even though he had the showrunner title.
Yeah.
And the number one was also running a different show. So he would kind of come in sporadically, but he had the
Yeah.
final say.
Yeah.
So so this guy was technically the number one, and my boss was the number two. And she told me she was like, actually, ironically, his name was Alex, my boss.
Good name.
So she was like, it's important for you to remember you were Alex's assistant. And number one was named Josh. This is so funny. She was like, you're Alex's assistant. You are not Josh's assistant. Your
Hmm.
loyalty has to be to Alex.
Yeah.
So if Josh or whoever tells you, don't tell Alex about this,
Yeah.
you absolutely tell Alex about this
Oh
because
yeah.
that you are his assistant. Your loyalty has to be to him.
Right.
Um, and I never really had an issue as far as like the writing staff went, but I mean, like, I don't know, did you, because you didn't have that, or like your boss on our show was the number one, so you didn't
Right.
have that same situation, but like, did you ever have times when it was like, because you don't want, the writing staff to think you're like a snitch or something, but like
Yeah.
you also like want to tell, you want to tell your boss if there's something that you feel like he should know. Were you ever conflicted in situations or did that never really come up?
It was never anything like that. I mean, I had the dilemma of who am I, who do I protect here, my boss or the show, but it was never like do I tell a secret thing? It would be say, um, this meeting really needs to happen tomorrow for the benefit of the show, for the show to run the smoothest. My
Hmm.
boss has something with his kid tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not
Uh,
moving that thing for his kid,
right.
even though that's the best thing for the show.
Right.
Because, like you said, my boss is my number one priority. And that means doing things for them that you disagree with. That means doing things for them that you know are objectively not in the best interest of the show, because you basically need their whole life to run smoothly so they can long term be the best, you know, steward of the show that they can be. And that might
Right.
mean short term sacrifices from the show for that person to be able to have, their family not want to murder them and get enough sleep every night and things like that. So there would be plenty of times where I would be doing something or having to deliver bad news or frustrating news or saying, I'm sorry, I can't move that for you, or we're going to have to move this meeting for the seventh time, even though I know it's really, really important because um, my higher priority is my boss.
Right. That makes sense. Did you ever have a situation where you like screwed up something big or like it made like committed like a potentially fireable offense or like, and I guess like how did you handle that situation? You don't have to go into, you can go into whatever specifics you feel comfortable going into, but sort of how
Yeah,
did you
no,
handle
it's
that
fine.
situation?
Luckily, I don't think anything too bad. I remember I screwed up an early casting call. And this was in the process of learning how productions work. So it was the first season on the show. The showrunner, this is very common, will write the premiere episode. And
Mhm.
so for the casting call for the first episode, it was just the showrunner and casting. For the second episode, so I thought going forward, oh, the showrunner handles all casting calls. No other writers are involved. But it's actually the writer of the episode, as you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
So I didn't inform the writers of the second episode when it came along that they were supposed to be on that casting call.
Hmm.
And what I did, I remember I came into work that morning, and I forget how I found out that they were supposed to be on the call. Maybe I saw an email with them listed as attendees, or
Right.
someone just mentioned something offhand. Um, but once I realized that they were supposed to be on the call, and the call was, you know, 30 minutes away at this point, and it was something like 8:30 or 9 before the writers' room started. So nobody was in the
Yeah.
office besides me and the showrunner yet. I
Right.
realized I screwed up. I realized this was bad.
Yeah.
Um, and I figured, okay, what should I do about this now? I could go into my boss's office with a problem, or I could go in with solutions. So, first thing I think that I did was I called both of the writers to let them know, I'm so sorry. Here's the situation. Didn't realize you're supposed to be on this call. Are you able to make it? If not, how do you want me to handle it? I can beg casting to move it. I can do whatever you need me to do. I can dial you in from here if you're driving on your way in. I can uh, you know, proposed a bunch of possibilities. And they were either, I think I might have also called Cast and asked for their options before I even talked to them. Is there any wiggle room to move it? What options can I present to them?
And for anyone who who's listening who doesn't know, this sucks because like 8:30 in the morning in our industry may as well be 6 o'clock.
Yeah, no one's
Like it
picking
may as
up.
well be 6
You're the
a.m.
only one in the
Yeah.
world, basically.
Yeah.
So, anyway, by the time I went in to tell my boss this is what happened, I basically said, hey, I'm really sorry. This is what happened. I have solutions A, B, or C for you. Pick one and everything will be okay. I'm sorry that this happened, but
Right.
any three of these solutions will be as painless as possible.
Right.
And then in their mind, it wasn't a huge deal. It was a way bigger deal in my mind than it was
Right.
theirs. But I think it would have been a way bigger deal if I just went and I said, "Oh, I didn't invite the writers to the casting meeting. That is incredibly timely. Uh, I don't know what you want to do about that."
Yeah. And I think the way you handled it was perfect. And I think the what you should not have done was what you just said, like go in with
Yeah.
no solutions. And what you absolutely should not do is go in and say, like, I didn't invite the writers to the casting meeting because I didn't know I had to.
Right.
That isn't, you should not say that. You should,
Right.
I sort of always preach accountability when it comes to these
Hmm.
mistakes. That's the best thing you can do is just fall on your sword and just hope for mercy.
Yeah.
Like,
No, you're right. Just own
yeah,
up. I also think don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to say, I'm new. When
yeah,
I called casting, I'm sure I said, I'm new. I'm sorry, this is probably very dumb, but can you please explain to me how this works? And people are often nice and willing to help you out. And even if they're not nice, sometimes you learn from what they say when they're not being nice to you. But I think just give yourself the chance to learn from them. So then again, you don't have to go into your boss and say, ask a billion questions that are so below them. Who goes into the casting meetings and when are those usually scheduled? And they've got so much going on. They just want to know, yes, it went well, or it's not going well, but choose any of these three options, then it will go well. So I think just don't be afraid to ask other members of the crew, especially other members of the support staff, the stupid questions because everyone was new and it's all learnable. Like I said, none of this is rocket science. So it's all teachable. And I think people are usually very happy to teach.
right. And like in that spirit, like, yeah, you don't want to be annoying. I get that. You
Hmm.
don't want to ask people redundant questions or if you think it's a stupid question, but like you always have to ask yourself, like, is it better to annoy this person or is it
Definitely.
better to screw something up? Like
Definitely.
after I got promoted to be on the writing staff, I trained the script coordinator who took over for me. And I
Yep.
wound up training a lot of this because like you said, a lot of the other shows were in our building. And I wound up
Yep.
training some of the other script coordinators on their shows as well. And I would
Right.
tell them, like, when you first start, you're going to have a million questions until you like
Yeah.
get the hang of this.
Yeah.
don't be afraid to come ask me the questions, like even if
Right.
you think you're being annoying, because it's better that you annoy me than you screw something up for the show.
Definitely.
Like
That's going to cause
let
everyone more work anyway.
right, like let me go home annoyed with you. That's way
Right.
better than you like you messing something up for the show.
Definitely.
So
And
yeah,
then,
just like be as redundant as you have to and
mhm.
ask the stupid questions, like double, triple
Yeah, they're
check.
not stupid. And something that I would try to advertise when I would go to people is, I'm only going to ask you this one. I'm not going to trouble you with this again. And I wasn't asking just in terms of how do I fix this minute situation, but how does this work? So I have a holistic understanding and I would write it all down. So the next time that came up, I would go back to my notes and I could reference it and I didn't have to ask that person again.
Yeah.
Now, of course,
No,
follow-ups come up. There are completely legitimate reasons to ask the same person questions
right.
over and over. But the less you can do that, and the more I think it carries weight when you go over to somebody with a question, the more they're going to take time out of what they're doing to answer your question because they'll know this is really important. They wouldn't be asking you if they didn't have a really good reason to.
Right. I'm so jealous of some of your like processes, like the going and taking notes on like asking the question, then going and taking notes on it. So you
It's
don't
it
like
it was all just so
forget.
I didn't have to think. I was a big believer in, think once now so I never have to think again. And as much as possible could become automatic and I wouldn't have to think about it again. So it was
Right.
really all laziness.
Right. It's all lazy.
I can blind follow notes without activating a single brain cell, no problem.
I like it. Did you so obviously you are a writer.
Hmm.
Did you write during work or how did you sort of and I know that's going to be super dependent on what job you have and how much time you have, but like
Right.
were you able to get writing done during work or how did you figure out to like
On
how to have time to write?
on our show, I got a ton of writing done during work.
Well, that's good.
It was really, really helpful. It depends on where your cubicle is positioned.
Yeah,
And it depends
that's true.
on how much time you have in the day. And on our show, it was very much hurry up and wait. There was a lot of wait time to get things
Uh,
done. And there could be 3 days where I didn't get a word written down, but then there could be 2 weeks where I was able to write for an hour every single day. And sometimes that meant writing during lunch. And there were always other assistants who were willing to meet up before work or after work to motivate each other to write together. When I was a writer's assistant, I wasn't able to write one word during work because you're literally in real time, transcribing everything everybody's saying. So that I had to make time nights and weekends. And when I was working at an agency, I had to make time nights and weekends. And, um, that's a sacrifice, but it's a sacrifice that pulled off when I had samples ready to show people.
right.
And it's a balance, you know, when I first started working at the agency and other assistants would say, "Hey, do you want to do something after work?" I would always say, "No, I have to go home and write," because I felt like I don't know anybody, so all I can control is that I can have more samples and better samples than everybody else because I'll spend the most time writing. And then eventually the assistants forced me to hang out with them, and they're my closest friends out here to this day.
Right.
And they've helped me try to get jobs and have just, been immeasurably helpful to my career. And so it's a balance. You need to work on your craft. You also have to actually have friendships and make connections that you'll be able to help each other out later in your career. But if you're not able to write during work, you do have to make the time outside. You just have to. You can't be that guy who missed the opportunity because he had nothing ready to show.
Right. It's so funny that you and I have never had like this kind of conversation
I
because like all the
know.
stuff you're saying are the things that I preach about, like control what you can control,
Yeah.
let the writing keep you sane because everything else will drive you crazy. Have faith
Right,
and
right,
like
exactly.
sit in front of your computer and do the work and have faith that that's going to be enough. And
Well,
like,
I think it comes
like,
from our similar backgrounds.
right. Um, so I feel like we've covered this, and
Hmm.
if we have nothing new to say about it, I'll just cut this part out.
Okay, cool.
So like I feel like I can tell pretty quickly when an assistant just like doesn't have the right attitude
Yeah,
or the type of attitude that's going to get them promoted up the food chain.
yeah.
Are there any like specific things that you'll see other people do where you're like, like that you would warn, newcomers into the industry about sort of like, don't do that?
Definitely. It's all none of it has to do with intelligence or
Not
talent
at
or
all.
it's 100% just attitude, acting like you're too big for the job. And I think assuming everything will be all right are the two biggest things. So if you act like you're too big for the job, you have an attitude, you look down on others, you look down on the job, you're going to do a lot wrong. People aren't going to want to promote you. People aren't going to want to see you as anything more than an assistant and see you as a writer or, see you as a friend or a coworker. And the way that you get that to happen, I think, is to try to go above and beyond. And then assuming that things are okay, I think that's the way that things fall through the cracks a lot. So
Mhm.
you do the bare minimum, you just hope that everything's going to work out, and you don't have some system of follow-ups, and you don't make an effort to understand how everything works holistically and not just in the terms of the one little assignment that you have. Things are going to get screwed up, I think. And you can't just view your position as, a checklist of things to do as quickly as possible so that you have no work anymore and you can go and write. You really have to view it as making the whole ship run as smoothly as possible. And then you'll have way more time to go and write because you won't be constantly dealing with little fires that you could have stopped from happening in the first place. Um, and I think in both of those cases, it's people who don't learn from their mistakes. And every single person will make mistakes. Every assistant's going to make mistakes. They'll see writers make mistakes. But I think there's a big difference between people who make the same mistake not only twice, but many, many times because they just don't care, or because um, you know, they'll do the bare minimum, or they just hope that that mistake won't happen again. And the people who take great effort to make sure that that never happens again.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's all smart. Yeah, the thing I always say, and it's like it's on the website, it's not a job,
Mhm.
it's an audition.
Yeah, most definitely.
You are auditioning for the people you're working with because they're the people who are going
Yeah.
to hire you. You're
Yeah.
working with writers who are eventually going to be showrunners.
Yeah.
Like again,
Right. You're
because you
not
were
necessarily auditioning for the show that you're on.
right, like again, because you were awesome, I was able to get you a job as a writer's assistant on a different show.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
so like you came into it with the right attitude. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's hard when you feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel on your show and you don't know of other shows that are going to be out there. So it's really easy
right.
to say, "Oh, I have no future here. I'm not going to care." But if you care about your coworkers still and you care about, the product, the actual TV that you're making, and, you know, you never know what can come out of it.
Hmm. And like I get it, man. Like I was at the assistant level for almost 10 years. And when you've been at that level for that long, it's easy to fall into this rut where you're just like, I don't care. Like, whatever. This show's gonna end. I'm gonna be on another show that I'm not gonna
Yeah.
get staffed on. It's very easy to fall into that rut. But like, don't be that person. You shouldn't be that person anyway, but certainly don't be that person when it's like your first show and you're the PA and you're supposed to have all this energy and like
Yep.
you like all this belief and hope.
And by the
Like,
way, you can think all those things.
right. Just
Tell
only
yourself whatever.
yeah.
I mean, but just don't
Yeah.
present that way. And you want to be someone that people want to be around, that the writers will want to
Yes.
come and sit and have lunch with and get to know you
Right.
because they just think that you're a cool person, not someone
Right.
who's going to complain for the only hour that they have their break that day.
Right. Absolutely.
Then you complain with the other assistants you all vent when nobody else is around and it's healthy and it's great.
right. Right.
Or the
And
or the
yeah,
writers when it's just you, the two of you, when it's late at night and no one else is around.
yeah, I mean that's what writers do. That's what text chains are
Yeah,
for. Like we all
there you
just like
go. Just do that in
that's
the
yeah.
text chain, not at work.
Yeah, that's the Ocean's 11 thing, right? Check emotion at the door.
There you go.
Yeah. And like neither one of us is saying like be fake, but like yeah, like you don't want to be. And it's too bad because I've worked with people who I know personally where I'm like, you're just like you're a delightful person, but like you
Yeah.
have
Oh yeah, yeah.
this edge where if the showrunners are stressed out people. And if you're
Yeah.
walking around all day like you don't want to be there and you're pissed off and like they
Yeah.
don't and they're dreading having to give you a notes or something because they think you're
Right.
going to get pissed off about it, like they're not necessarily going to want to work with you. So
Right.
like yeah, you do have to present in a way that like makes people want to work with you.
Yeah, and it's not fake at all.
Yeah.
It's just making an effort. It's even on my bad days when I'm really not about it, still being as kind and as warm to my coworkers as I can and trying to make their lives
Right.
easier. That's an authentic thing, even if I don't feel like doing it, you make a real earnest effort to do it, even when you don't feel like it. That's, just being a good coworker, I think, or being a good human being.
Yeah, absolutely. Um well, man, I think that we've covered it.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how long we went for, but this was awesome.
This was really cool. Yeah, you could tell me this was 20 minutes or an hour and a half, but that was fun.
I know. Hopefully, I don't have to tell you like, oh, it didn't get recorded and we have to do the whole thing
Right.
again.
I see the red dot, so hopefully we're good.
Yeah. All right,
This
I'm
is
gonna
really cool.
stop.
A lot of questions I had not thought about in a long time.
All right, I'm gonna stop recording.